In Chapter 14, we examined the post-Civil War South. Now, in Chapter 15, we're going to look at the same time period, roughly 1865 to 1900, only we're going to examine the Trans-Mississippi West. Now, as we look at the conquest and settlement of the Trans-Mississippi West, two men from Illinois are going to be extremely important in this process. These two men never lived west of the Mississippi River, though. But before we get there, the three themes that you want to look for as we go through Chapter 15. Number 1, the Native American losses in the West. Number 2, the Anglo-American settlement of the West. And number 3, the creation of the myth of the West. The 19th century conquest and settlement of the West was aided in part by two men from Illinois. Now, both of them moved to Illinois from back east in the mid-19th century. First of these, John Deere. John Deere moved out here to Grand Detour, Illinois, along the Rock River, just a few miles north of Dixon, and set up shop here as a blacksmith. His steel-tip plow replaced the cast-iron version that had gone before and was wonderful at turning over the heavy sod of the Midwest. That steel-tip plow became the foundation of an agricultural empire. And Deere made a fortune, eventually moved down the road to Moline, and set up a company that you're probably all very familiar with today. As important as John Deere's steel-tip plow was, a second invention, developed only an hour away in DeKalb, Illinois, by a local businessman and politician, was equally important to the settlement of the West.
I'm just off campus at Northern Illinois University in DeKalb, and outside of the Joseph Glidden home, which you'll almost miss if you're not looking for it very closely. Glidden was a community leader who'd held many posts, private and public. In 1872-73, so the story goes, at the instigation of his wife, Glidden started to tinker around with a way to make a fencing that would help keep the livestock in. The result was barbed wire. Glidden then had this patented in 1874. And barbed wire, invented right here in DeKalb, Illinois, became one of the primary sources for settling the West. Fencing in the livestock, controlling the land, and allowing the farmers to establish their farms. It was in this barn in 1874, now sandwiched between a florist and a Burger King, that Joseph Glidden and his partner, Phineas Vaughn, a blacksmith from the community, began to manufacture barbed wire. And from this point, barbed wire was shipped out all across the country and became a mainstay of cattle raising throughout the United States.
At the same time that Deere's plow and Glidden's barbed wire were doing their part to settle the West, so was the United States Army, specifically the 7th Cavalry.
Here's an interesting bit of trivia for you. In 1876, the St. Louis Cardinals baseball team was established. But also in 1876, General George Armstrong Custer and the 7th Cavalry fought its famous Last Stand at Little Bighorn. These 5 rifles at the Rock Island Arsenal are from the actual battlefield. Curators matched the rifles to the spots on the battlefield. The small map down here shows where they were actually used. A bit of interesting science there. They matched cartridge casings to the firing pins. But these rifles demonstrate a couple of things. One, the cavalry wasn't way behind the times in the weapons that they carried. They were, however, a little confused. These 5 rifles represent 3 different caliber sizes, which may have been a lot of confusion on a battlefield like that.
So as we can see, 2 Illinoisans with modest resources and very good ideas were able to influence the settlement of the West in a very significant way. Okay, so what have we gotten from Chapter 15? Our 3 main themes again. Number 1, the Native American losses in the West. Number 2, the Anglo-American settlement of the West. And number 3, the creation of the myth of the West. So long from Grand Detour, DeKalb, and Moline. I'll see you for Chapter 16.